Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the LiftAffect podcast. I am your host, Matt McNeil, founder, clinical director, and director of human performance at LiftAffect, where we assist professional pilots with maintaining better mental health and optimizing their mental skills. The goal of this podcast is simple: to help pilots and other high liability professionals and disciplines come out of the shadows to discover how we can live better lives personally and professionally. Join us each episode as we discuss various topics ranging from mental health, mental skills and performance, to business, entrepreneurship, and a few other surprises along the way.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the LiftAffect podcast, where your host, Karl Keller, and the ever-mercurial Mr. Matt McNeil are here to engage with all of your senses and your thoughts and your ideas. So how you doing, buddy?
Well, let me just tell people, we were sitting here going, okay, well, this is what I think we should talk about. And then Karl just started in on this thing.
Oh,
and I was like, dude, we should have hit record, man. So, straying off from anything that we thought, can you just rephrase what you just said to me?
Oh my God!
What we were just talking about.
You're asking.
You just go back, just repeat, because I think that we should talk about that today. What we were just talking about.
Well,
and I said, oh, we should have started recording. So I hit the record buttons. Here we are.
Well, I started out today by saying, hey, why don't you want to talk about something that's a little bit different from some of our recent conversations? And I was talking about how difficult it is today to have conversations with people, because everybody has become so polarized. You're either on the far left or the far right. And if you don't agree with everything that particular side, whoever you're talking to, espouses or believes, you sometimes are perceived as the devil incarnate, because why don't, as an example, in politics, you're either hard left or hard right. Well, there's no middle ground. And I was saying sometimes it seems like the only time the hard left and the hard right agree is when someone is espousing something in the middle, saying, can we have a conversation that's balanced, that both sides try to destroy the middle. There can be no bipartisan, no compromise. Mm-hmm. And I said, sometimes it's just really hard to know how to have a conversation with someone that has got very hard beliefs. You're pro-Trump, you're anti-Trump, you're pro-abortion, you're pro-life, you're pro-gun, you're anti-gun. And there can be no meaningful conversation to help educate yourself, educate them. Just have a conversation about it, because most things aren't inherently exclusively evil, although some people may say abortion's evil or guns are evil. But there's nuances and there's conversations that can be had. But I just sometimes struggle to figure out how. And what I've talked to several people going, well, I just don't go around that person anymore, because that way I don't have to deal with the issues, or I don't talk about anything other than how's the weather. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of makes it for, I can't say meaningless conversation, but it's nice to be able to have an educated, intelligent conversation, because I may learn something, I may educate them, or they may educate me. But how do you communicate with someone like that? And that was the gist of our when he said, let's hit the button.
And I think what I had prefaced was, before you kind of went into that, was you said, maybe we should talk about something funny. And I said,
yeah, lighthearted.
Cool. Let's talk about narcissism. Because I actually have some really funny stories from graduate school about narcissism. And I deal with a lot of narcissism. I shouldn't have said that. Okay, there's certain personality profiles with certain types, and I'm not saying pilots. We all have narcissistic features, or tendencies, but like true narcissisms, I actually enjoy working with narcissists, because there's more to it than just narcissism. I mean, there's something underneath that I think is really important. But I find my interactions with narcissists, especially when I was first getting trained in working with narcissists, they are hysterical. I mean, they're like some of the funniest stories I have of doing therapy and strategic coaching and stuff with narcissists. they're hysterical. I could share some of those.
As I would say, regale us, please. That's probably a better topic than mine. But
let's talk about yours for a second, because I think that it's a really good question. Is how do we have these conversations? And I think the easiest, strategy is to recognize that most people, I think, aren't really in a place to, certain people, maybe not most, but there are some people that are not capable of having these kinds of conversations. They're too impassioned to be able to have a discussion around it. And I think that when a conversation isn't actually really a conversation, quote, where it's more just somebody trying to convince you to change your mind, I don't think that that's a conversation. I think that is evangelizing, or just trying to cajole somebody into agreeing with you. And I don't view that as any sort of meaningful discourse. That's just a attempt to dominate. So I think maybe defining, like, is this really a conversation that we're trying to have, or is it just you're trying to convince me to believe what you believe, and I'm trying to convince you to believe what you believe? I don't think that that's a conversation. So that is sort of foolish. That's foolish. And that's what most people, I think, define as a conversation. It's not really a conversation. Do people really want to have a discussion of exploration? Are you approaching the conversation with judgment, or are you approaching it with curiosity? Let's start with that.
I usually want to understand the other perspective and see if there's something I'm missing. But let me ask you a quick question. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like that I feel that in the last 4 to 6 years, there's been a huge shift in the percentages of polarization, where that middle ground seems to have really shrunk. Do you see that, or is that just my
I think it's always been. I think it's always been there. I think it just has a platform now. It just has a voice. Trump, whether you liked him or hated him, Trump was very, very different than any candidate we've ever seen. And I think he represented something for obviously quite a lot of people. And what did he represent? We could argue there's lots of different theories that I think they'll in the future they'll unpack, what was all of this. But something unlocked, I think, with that. And I think those opinions and those ideas were always there. I just think that there was a platform that was given to be able to express that.
Well, it definitely unlocked a lot of things, because it wasn't, on religious and on guns rights, you name it. It just seems like the floodgates opened. In the last 6 years, people talked about it in a more civil tone than they do now. Now it's more.
Yeah, there's no civility with it. I think that it's been a long time coming, to be honest with you. I think that stuff has always been burbling underneath. And then when something becomes normalized, or it's given a platform, Michael Hyatt writes a lot about platform. When you're given when you have the platform, then you're in a position of influence and power. And that can normalize a direction, whether it's right or wrong. That's, I'm not here to make that determination. I have my own opinions about it, which I'm not going to share because it's irrelevant. I think but here's what I think is what's going on. I think that people, so one is they're not really looking for a conversation. They're just looking to fight, or they're looking to try to convince you to believe something that they believe, which I think is inherently interesting. And I mean that not in a condescending way, but I think that's interesting. What is this need to convince somebody to believe like you? What does that mean for you? What does that mean for that person?
Well, and I think for some people, depending on what it is, like for instance, when you're talking about abortion, they're talking about how they feel like especially on the pro-life side, I'll say it that way, where that you're killing a life form, from the moment of conception. So they feel it's a life I think, often a life or death situation. And I could say the same thing about people that believe guns are inherently evil, that people are dying every day because guns are on the street. So I think some of them, it's almost I'm not going to say the word right today. That if
Existential?
That's the word. I couldn't say it.
Yeah.
That if we don't deal with it, or the environment, just global warming, that, hey, the life of our species, our entire civilization is at risk if we don't do certain things. So I think in some regards, there's that belief that this is something we have to deal with, and we have to deal with it right now. And you need to understand why, and you need to understand my side. And then there's the others that go, well, you're absolutely wrong. For whatever, it's life doesn't begin at conception. Guns aren't inherently evil, and no, there's no global warming. It's global cooling, And so some just like to have the argument. Some believe that things aren't as dire as they are, but just like I just think that's a lot of the people. There's this, oh my God, it's just there's an immediacy that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, the reality is that there are certain places where having those kinds of, again, I put air quotes, conversations, and I'm very hesitant to call something a conversation when a conversation is conversing, I think, in a respectful way, that where there's a point of discovery that's as the aiming point. I don't think most things I would qualify as conversations. I think those are inappropriate. There are environments that are absolutely inappropriate to be having those conversations. The flight deck of an airplane is one of those. That is not a place. It's irrelevant to the operation. It's irrelevant to your job. I understand you have to sit there for 12 hours and fart in the same seat, whatever. But that's your job. Your job is not to sit up there and talk politics or religion or anything else that is other than related to the functions of your job. And if you cannot do that in a respectful way, in a way that does not create opportunity for hostility and agitation, then it is not something that you should be doing. I really do believe that. I think that there's a safety element and there are some stories I could tell you that I've been consulted on from mental health perspectives that would blow your mind. I mean, the breach of safety that has happened because some of these discussions. And then you add in people with guns in the flight deck, which we have. It is not a place for people to be getting agitated about their belief system. If you're flying with an FFDO, my God, do not have that is absolutely off limits as far as I'm concerned. Because there's a gun. I used to, when I had an office in downtown Denver, where I would see a lot of pilots. I'd still have an office, but most of it's telehealth at this point because COVID just sort of changed. People don't really want to come back, and it's much easier, but whatever. But I would have, I would ask every person when I would first meet them, come in, I would say, "Are you armed?" And some of these guys would say, "Yeah." And I would say, "You need to go put your weapon in your car. Because if you don't feel safe here without a gun, this isn't the place for you. This is not the right thing for you." Because think about doing therapy. What could come up with somebody with a gun? And psychologists and therapists have been murdered because of situations like this. So,
what were the reactions of those that you said that to?
Usually they complied. They were like, "Oh, okay, yeah, no problem. I can do that." Hold on a second. There is a massive spider on my wall. I think I'm going to kill it.
Well, spiders can be good too,
They
catch the flies.
Let me get a cup to get this thing out of here. Hold on a second. Hold on.
Well, while Matt is doing that, obviously, I guess spiders are persona non grata, or in this case, spider non grata in his world there. I'd sing for you, but you really wouldn't like it. So I think we'll skip that. But while one of the things I was telling Matt while we were doing our pre-podcast conversation was that there were some very challenging conversations that occurred at times in the cockpit, and especially when you're a new hire trying to figure out how to deal with it. It can be very, very challenging because obviously you're a new hire, you're on probation. So how do you deal with something like that when you basically are in a very subordinate position and don't want to lose or put your career at risk because someone's pontificating a certain position? Usually it was had to do with religion or right to life, and occasionally guns. There were some very hardcore right and very hardcore left, and it on a 3 or 4 day trip, it could be extremely challenging to walk that middle ground without just sort of saying yes, because they had a requirement to write a probationary report on you after every trip, and some of them could be, well, let's just say less than complimentary. I won't say vindictive, but definitely could have made life very, very, difficult for you during your probationary year. So it was just, you just didn't want to deal with it. You were trying not to cause any more waves. Do your job, do it right, do it with the minimum amount of conflict or concern about putting your job at risk. So, thankfully it was only a handful, but those were very, very long trips. But it seems, for me at least lately, having conversations, and I do try to have conversations because I want to understand, has become very, very difficult with so many people, to the point where some people don't even want to talk to you because you don't agree with everything they say. And it's hard when you've had what you would think are friendships of many years all of a sudden dissolve overnight because now they feel like they've been able to grieve their errands, their thoughts, and you're not on their team. Now that I've pontificated enough, I will bring back to the story to Matt, and we'll see how much of this actually ends up in the podcast.
Okay, we'll see.
Because if he's smart, he'll get rid of every bit I just said.
God. So no. So most of these people were pretty respectful of that. But there were ones that said, no, I want to be armed. And I would say, I'm sorry, I cannot work with you. And that's just that's a safety related issue, because things the point of this is that things get charged. People get charged.
Get activated.
And get activated. And do you want somebody activated in an enclosed environment that's safety critical? The point is to try to decrease activation, not increase it. So these topics are activating for people. But here's what I believe. I don't believe you can change people. I think people, you can have conversations that can facilitate change, but you can't force somebody to change. You can't force somebody to think like you or believe like you. And I have flown with people where they would try to get into stuff. And I would just kind of try to keep it light, but I would say, look, if they know kind of what my beliefs are and they're trying to change us, look, let me ask you this question. Is there anything I could say that would make you flop your position to mine? And they would usually say, no. And I'd say, is there anything that you could say that would make me flip-flop my position? I would say, I don't think so. Maybe, but I don't think so. So then there's no point in having a conversation about this. There's no point. So let's talk about what we're going to go get for dinner. You can't change people. You can't make somebody change. And certainly the way to make somebody not change is to preach at them and try to make them feel as if they're wrong. Like that's just absurd. That doesn't facilitate anything.
I can't tell you how many, when I was flying with them, that were captains, and we would talk, and an awful lot of them liked the quality of life issue. They wanted to be senior in a seat and not and be able to choose their schedule. And so I would ask him, how come you're pretty junior right now? Why are you in the left seat? And he said, I went to the left seat because I was tired of listening to the guy who was in the left seat. So now that I'm in that seat, I'm not forced to have to listen to a captain. And it was interesting that the reason that they would actually go there, because they just got tired of, unfortunately, even for most people, there's a hierarchy. There's a captain and a first officer, and the captain sets the tone of the flight. And
I understand that, but I think that's horseshit. I mean, I think I understand that, but like, we're not in the military. There's not. Yes, the captain is ultimately it's the captain's word, unless he's crazy, and then you overtake the captain.
Well, that's safety of flight issue now.
Absolutely, which happens. But I don't believe, like, this is a civilian job. I don't have to sit here and listen to something that has nothing to do with our job. There's nothing in our job description, in any job description of any airline, that says your job is to listen to somebody pontificating or explaining to you a belief system that has nothing to do with the function of your job. And if it creates a hostile work environment, every FO has a right to say, I'm not comfortable talking about this with you. And if that damages CRM, then call your MOD and get pulled from the trip. But there's nothing in your job description that says I have to listen to you talk about religion or politics or whatever the hell it is that you believe that may be diametrically opposed to my belief system. There's nothing that says we have to have those conversations, even if you are the captain and I'm the FO, or I'm the captain and you're the FO. If I'm the captain, it doesn't give me the right to say, I'm going to preach at you about what I believe and you're going to sit there and take it. There's nothing in your job description that says that. And that's why I'm a firm believer. If this is a point of contrast that has a point to be charged, leave it out of the flight deck. There's plenty of other things to talk about. There's plenty of other things to talk about. And if there isn't, then just be quiet. Just do your job. Do your job. Do your frickin' job. I'm sorry if you're bored and you just don't like your job, or you don't like the hours, and then go find another job. I mean, stay in your lane of doing your job. You can tell I've worked pro standards. It's like, you bunch of idiots. Oh, why can't you get what were you talking about? Well, that's dumb. You're a Democrat, you're a Republican, or you're pro-choice and you're pro-life. People say pro-abortion. Nobody's pro-abortion. It's pro-choice to make an abortion. I mean, just saying, right?
Yeah,
but it's
I misspoke them that way.
Yeah, but I mean, that's, people say it all the time, and it's like I have clients that have had abortions. It was not, they loved it and just can't wait to go do that. It was very difficult. It's the right to choose is the
choice.
the position. But it's like if you're these two things, you've established that, and then you decided to get into this, you both should be fired. Seriously,
there wouldn't be much of an airline for any airline if that happened.
Yeah, you both should be punished because you know what you're being punished? You're being punished for being stupid. That's what you should be punished for. What, do you really think you're going to change this person's mind? Or about religion, a belief in God or Allah, or trying to make a Jew into a Christian? Or, I mean, it's like, how stupid can you be? How stupid can you be? Say it, Karl.
I said pretty stupid.
Pretty stupid. It's like, stop trying to change people. Just go with your thing, And I think but here's what I believe. I think if you have to go around evangelizing and trying to convince other people, and I know this is very counter to, a lot of Christian beliefs, which is you have to save everybody. And I was raised a Catholic, just very transparently. Didn't say I'm a Catholic now, and there's a difference between religion and spirituality, but we don't have to get into that now. But if you think you're going to save somebody, through a conversation in the cockpit, I'm sorry, you're deluding yourself. It'd be like somebody trying to save you from your Christianity. How do you think that's going to go? It's like, use your head, really. Use your head. And I think the people that are doing this all the time are doing it because they've lost purpose in their life. They actually lack meaningful purpose. If you got to go out and do that and shove your belief system, whether it's politics or religion or whatever the hell it is, and try to shove that down somebody else's throat, you've lost. You don't have an aiming point. Your aiming point is not there, and you can't change people. I mean, there's the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can. And here's the key piece, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Yep.
It's if you don't have the wisdom to know that, you need to get it. Hopefully I'm giving you some of it today. Hopefully our conversation that we're having is people will benefit from that. So I think we've gotten into a very divisive place. I think some of it has to do with technology. It's the immediacy of a ticker, a constant scroll of information. It convinces you to feel like you're like it's War of the Worlds is coming. And there are real things if you don't believe COVID is real, it was the response sucked, but is COVID real? Yes, COVID is real. Science is a real thing. It's not a choice. Yes, science is a ongoing change. It changes all the time, and it's always developing. But science is a real thing. If you don't think global warming is there climate changes, I go with what the science says. I don't go with opinions. And look, if you don't believe in science, or you think, well, no, those scientists are, and there's a scientist that says this, that's counter that. I look for peer-reviewed, empirically validated platforms to determine science. But so all of that aside, there's so much information that we're bombarded with nonstop, and you feel like the world is just an unsafe place in every way.
Well, and I think also the other part of the technology piece, and I think you were saying it indirectly, is the fact is that just about every point of view now has a platform, whereas before there was a lot more vetting and filtering of things before they were put in front of you, good or bad. You didn't. Now, before, if someone believed the Earth was flat, there were only so many people that they were going to come in contact with.
Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden, the internet has allowed them to say, "Oh, there's a whole." A whole group of people, 10,000, 100,000.
Yep.
So now, if you have a point of view, I guarantee that there's someone out there on the internet that will agree with you. And now all of a sudden, you can create this commonality in this community, and all of a sudden go, "I'm right." Whereas before, people would say, "Are you really right?" Well, now you do it.
Think about the psychological impact that has in a flight deck.
Yep.
When you show up for work. Or a surgical suite, or a courtroom, or a boardroom. It's making people really anxious. I think we feel the level of anxiety is so high. It's of pandemic proportions. And anxiety is a fear of, in many respects, it's a fear of the future. It's where is the tiger that's around the corner that's going to eat me? And it's very easy to convince yourself that everything is unsafe. Everything is unsafe. And that's some of the safety stuff that, we've touched on that too, is like, it's gone, to this, like, I need a safe environment, which means we can't talk about, like, okay, I'm going to criticize you for your performance, saying, that was not up to snuff. And, I can't have those conversations because that makes me feel unsafe. That is like, it's so swung. It's gone so extreme. This is what I've said over and over, is it's so far to the left, it's so far to the right of the mean, or above or below. Let's say that. Let's not say left or right, because that's got political implications. What I mean is, it's so far away from the mean. It's gone like 3 standard deviations below to 3 standard deviations above, that we think that's like the norm. If you know what a bell curve is, what percentages of standard deviations, like 5% are 3% above or 5 or low. It's not the majority of the population, but it's gone so far off the rails.
But those 3 to 5 are the ones that. But that small section is the one that dominates.
Squeaky wheel gets the grease. But it does not represent the majority of the population.
So where's the off-ramp? Where's the off-ramp?
Awareness, standards, standardization, alternatives. Like, training people, like, let's just stay in our lane of the flight deck. I think training people on what are things that you can meaningfully discuss that aren't activating, or training people on, look, it seems like here's some behaviors that you can observe in your co-pilot, your co-captain, your captain, whatever, the person you're flying with, where you may be touching on something that isn't a good idea. Some basic interpersonal training and how to, like, work back from that. Say, look, okay, let's create an environment that is conducive to safety, number one, and interpersonal satisfaction, number two. But there's like no training at all in interpersonal interactions and generational interactions. What does the boomer have to do with the millennial or the Z? Like, there's ways you can actually have very meaningful time together. But it's like, no, you just throw them in the flight deck and expect them to work it out. And that is showing to be a problem. There's huge differences. And the airlines have to really get on top of this if they want to, because there's going to be there's pretty serious safety implications around this. So I think interpersonal training, emotional intelligence, like EQ, it's not just IQ, but EQ, learning to train some of that up to proficiency is a good thing. And also just like creating some standards of, I know it's like the captain sets the tone. That always bothered me, because it's like, well, okay, sets the tone of what? Of safety? Well, that should be the tone. I mean, yeah, of course the captain should set the tone, but it's like the captain sets the tone of being an asshole the whole trip. Unacceptable. That's not acceptable, just because of, leading by position of power, by position or force, is not actual leadership. That's poor leadership. That's awful leadership. You don't lead by position or force. And a good captain should set a tone that is one of inclusiveness and teamwork and safety first, and being able to monitor that maybe these are conversations that should not be had.
But see, here's the key word you used, should. There's no requirement for them to do that. They're like I've always said in the cockpit, there are more than one way to do something.
Well, you could outright ban conversations of activation points.
That can almost, depending on who it is, can almost create its own potential safety issues. Depending on how that other person reacts.
How so? Well, what if there was and let's just spitball here. What if there was a policy that says we don't talk about these topics because history has proven that they're too activating.
You can say
we
that.
do not allow them to be.
Doesn't mean that will happen, short of them putting the cockpit voice recorder and having them be able to audit it, which nobody wants. That's the only way you...
The CDR is always on, guys.
It is, but they're not going to pull it under normal circumstances unless there's an incident. But what I'm saying is, I think that it can... It's almost like after the strikes, when you had scabs that were in the aircraft, that was unsafe environments. Even though you may be doing your job professionally, there were some very, very challenging flights that occurred with somebody because some of them felt like everything you did was an attack on them. They just had to figure out what it was. Whatever you said, whatever you did, you were dissing them, you were trying to embarrass them, humiliate them. And so even if you did your job and nothing but, sometimes it was a very challenging flight to have to go through because they didn't trust you and didn't believe that you were that you weren't trying to, excuse my language, screw them. So I'm just saying,
but I mean, think about this. Even just like the word scab. Like, what have we done to our profession? Like, what have we done to our culture? That is like, you don't agree with me, so screw you. I remember getting on riding a jump seat on a United jump seat one time. And I was on the jump seat, the captain's like, okay, he pulls out this book and he finds it. He goes, okay, you're good. And there's three guys in there, right? There's the pilot, the first officer, and there's another guy in the jump, which is a pilot. And then there's me. And the captain goes, hey, my name's, whatever. And this is my first officer. And he shakes his hand. And then he points at the other jump seater and he goes, and that guy's a scab. We don't talk to him. Isn't that the same thing as you don't agree with me? So I'm going to create a hostile work environment. I mean, or you don't agree with me, so screw you. And look, I understand the whole I've talked to people that have been scabs, quote unquote scabs. I think it's a very derogatory term. It's a human being. You don't know their reasons. You don't know their reasons, just like they don't know your reasons.
I agree with you. That being said, the prevailing thought out there is that you basically cared so little about your fellow man that you were willing to basically take their job from them. That's how they looked at it.
Let me ask you a question.
Let me tell you a quick story.
Let me ask you one question.
Sure.
If your wife was sick and dying of a disease and you couldn't afford to lose your insurance, you couldn't afford to lose your income, what would you do? Would you quit for the fellow man, or would you save your family?
Let me tell you the story that ties in exactly what you just said. I flew with a captain. He had been with Eastern, and they were having strike parties to keep the solidarity during the strike. And about 4 or 5 months into the strike, they were having one, and he and his best friend, they were at a little place where there was like a pond or a small lake, and they were out on the lake together having a drink. And the guy goes, he said, I just want to let you know, I want to tell you first. He said, that tomorrow I'm going to cross the line. He said, why? He said, well, he was talking about how his wife was really, really sick, and there was just no money left, and that the management had contacted him and said, if you cross, we'll cover you, we'll reinstate your health insurance immediately, and you'll be able to get your wife her the medical needs that she needs to have. And the guy said, please don't do that. Please don't do that. And he said, I just don't see any other way. I have nothing left that I can do. And he told me, he said, they spent the rest of the day, they drank and they cried and they hugged. And I asked him, whatever happened? Have you seen the guy since? Because he said he crossed the next day. And I'll never forget this statement. He goes, the next time I see him is when I piss on his grave. This was his best friend. That was how polarizing and how strong that was, and how he felt like, there was no reason. And that's something I've thought about. What would I do? That's because at the end of the day, somebody always said they always have a story. Everybody has a story. And so you're right. Everybody's a human being. The ones that I really have a dislike for, if you want to say, the ones said, I don't give a damn about you. I just did it because of the money. And it allowed me to go to the front of the line and get super seniority.
Yep.
Then those are the ones I have no lost love for.
Right.
The others, there are some very difficult things, and not everybody knows what they are. So yeah, right. That can be.
I think decision making is. I think you have to have latitude. There's context. Things are not just black and white as much as we want to believe that they are. And I'll tell you this: it's that you haven't walked a day in my shoes. It's very easy to be an armchair quarterback about what is right or wrong, but I can tell you, I sit with people all day, with pilots all day, that are going through crazy, incredible things. And their situations are dynamic and they're unique to them. And it's not always just black and white. And it's so easy to pass judgment, judging the shit out of everybody. It's kind of a fool's run. It's like, you don't know. I wish people would just stop acting like they know everything about everybody else. They don't know crap about you. People barely even know themselves, much less what's better for everybody else. Like, if people just focused a little bit more on living a life of virtue and values and showing up as the best person that they're capable of being, instead of just walking around judging everybody else, I think we'd be a lot better off. We'd be a lot better off. And any time when people spend all of their time judging other people, usually their lives are the biggest dumpster fire of all. And it's so easy to just distract yourself and focus on somebody else instead of focusing on what's in the mirror. So I'm very skeptical of really judgy people. Usually there's a reason that they're spending all their time judging other people and not really working on themselves. Look, everybody's got their own stink.
Yep.
Everybody.
There's an saying, everyone's got an opinion and it usually stinks.
Yeah,
but you know what?
It's like I think at some point you've got to figure out what's the best way to live. Do you want to live with some love in your heart, or do you want to live with hate in your heart? It's up to you. You want to go piss on people's graves? I mean, if that's what you want, if that's a virtuous life, then go for it. But I think that's the recipe for illness, to be honest with you.
At the beginning of this episode, we said we were going to talk about lighthearted stuff. Thank God we did. Wow, boy.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, wait until you see what happens when we get serious.
Tell me to go dark, and it'll probably be a big comedy.
Thank God we didn't go dark today.
Yeah, but here's the takeaway. Think about the impact that this is having on your emotional health. The conversations that you're having, the getting into some of this stuff. Is this making you more anxious? Is this life-giving, or is this just death-giving? I think we got to be very careful. And really, is that something we want to bring into a safety critical environment? Is that a really good idea? I'll leave it to you all to make that decision. Send some emails, let us know.
Well, I think he just took my closing away from me. Other than, please give us a like, give us a review, let people know what your thoughts are. This, especially the very end of our conversation here, is a very polarizing one for pilots. So give us your thoughts. As always, we appreciate you and we thank you for being a part of our community. And we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the LiftAffect podcast. If you want to dive deeper into this episode and every episode, go to our website, lifteffect.com/podcast. If you're enjoying the show, we would love it if you'd follow us on Spotify and rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. We really appreciate your support. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, all with the ID Matthew McNeil. This show is brought to you by LiftAffect, a clinical mental health and consulting company that assists air carriers, corporate flight departments, pilot unions, and commercial pilots by providing comprehensive psychotherapy and mental skills coaching services to pilots with mental health and mental performance-related issues. Visit LiftAffect.com, that's LiftAffect.com, to book your free consultation. And finally, this podcast is for general informational purposes only. It does not constitute the practice of counseling, psychotherapy, medicine, or any other healthcare service, including the giving of medical advice. No therapeutic or provider-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and any materials linked to this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional psychological advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining advice for any psychological or medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the LiftAffect podcast.